The hammer stops mid-swing. "You should be grateful I'm paying you anything." David Harrison lowers the tool slowly, sawdust clinging to his forearms, sweat cutting clean lines down a face that hasn't rested in hours. Behind him, the deck stands finished. Every board level. Every screw countersunk. 12 hours of work, done right, done clean. The homeowner counts out less than half the agreed amount and holds it out like a favor. David doesn't argue. He learned years ago that arguing with people who already decided not to pay you fair only wastes daylight he doesn't have. He takes the money, folds it, puts it in his pocket without looking at it again. His truck ticks and groans as he loads his tools into the bed, the engine light glowing orange on the dashboard like it's mocking him. $43.18. That's what sits in his account right now. Rent is due in 6 days. Nia needs new shoes. The truck needs a part he can't afford to name out loud. Welcome back, family. If you enjoy powerful stories with real-life lessons, subscribe and join us. Now, let's begin. Imagine you had $43 left to your name and a daughter waiting on you at home. Would you still choose honesty over an easy shortcut? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you'd do. David climbs into the driver's seat and sits there a moment, hands on the wheel, saying nothing. The radio doesn't work. The air conditioning doesn't work. What still works is the steady, stubborn thing inside his chest that refuses to cut corners, even when cutting corners would be easier. His phone rings before he can pull out of the driveway. Unknown number. He almost lets it go to voicemail. Almost. Hello? The voice on the other end is a woman's, tired in a way that has nothing to do with the hour. "I need someone who can start tomorrow morning. Early, my fence is down. Most of it. Storm damage." "Where's the property?" "Ashwood Estate. Off Cardinal Ridge Road." David knows the name. Everyone in Clover Falls knows the name. 12 acres of land behind iron gates, owned by a woman most people have only seen in magazine photos, never in person. "That's a big job," he says. "Might take a few days." "I don't care how long it takes," she says. "I care that it's done right. Can you be there by 7? Something in her voice makes him pause. Not the words, the weight underneath them. Like she's holding a phone in one hand and something much heavier in the other. "I'll be there," David says. The line goes dead before he can ask her name. He sits in the truck a moment longer, staring at the house behind him, the one that just underpaid him for honest work. Then he starts the engine and drives toward the only person who makes any of this worth it. Nia is sitting on the porch step of the after-school program when he pulls up, backpack between her feet, swinging her legs like the day hasn't worn her down the way it's worn him down. "You're late," she says, not unkindly. "I know, baby. Let's go home." She climbs in, buckles herself, and doesn't ask about money. She never does. 10 years old and she already knows not to ask questions that might make her father's shoulders drop lower than they already sit. That night, after her homework is checked and her lunch is packed for tomorrow, David sits at the kitchen table with a stack of bills he already knows he can't fully pay. He doesn't sleep much. He never does the night before a big job. At 6:40 the next morning, his truck rattles down Cardinal Ridge Road, past a wrought iron gate standing open, and up a long gravel driveway lined with oak trees older than the town itself. That's when he sees it. Nearly 300 feet of fencing, torn apart in a way no storm has ever done. Posts snapped clean at the base. Brackets ripped loose like something pulled them, not blew them. Wood splintered in patterns too straight, too deliberate to be weather. David steps out of his truck slowly, eyes narrowing at the damage in front of him. Storms don't break things like this. Something else did. David crouches beside the nearest fence post, running his thumb along a jagged edge, and stops cold. This cut isn't from wind, it's from a blade. He glances up at the main house, 3 stories of white brick with dark green shutters, and sees a woman standing at a tall window, phone pressed to her ear, pacing in short, tight steps. She doesn't come outside to greet him. She barely looks his way. David gets to work. By 9, he's pulled apart the wreckage of the first section, laying broken boards in neat piles, separating salvageable wood from ruined wood. He works the way he always works. Steady hands, no wasted motion, silence instead of noise. Harper Pollson finally crosses the lawn around 10, still on the phone, waving off whoever's on the other end with a clipped, "I'll call you back." "You're the contractor," she says, not really a question. "David Harrison." Harper Pollson. She doesn't offer a hand. Her eyes are already moving past him, scanning the damage like she's looking for something specific and not finding it. How bad is it? Worse than storm damage should be. That gets her attention. Meaning? David holds up a section of the broken post. "See these cuts? Clean, straight. A storm snaps wood, it doesn't slice it. And these brackets?" He points to one hanging loose from the frame. "Somebody loosened these by hand. Bolt by bolt." Harper's jaw tightens. "You're saying someone did this on purpose?" "I'm saying a storm didn't." She studies him for a long moment. The kind of look people give when they're deciding whether to believe a stranger or dismiss him. Then her phone rings again, and whatever decision she was about to make gets swallowed by the next crisis waiting on the other end of the line. "I have calls," she says, already walking away. "Fix what you can." David watches her go, phone pressed to her ear, before she's even 10 steps off, voice sharpening into something defensive. Lawyers, board members. He can't hear the words, only the tone, and the tone tells him enough. Whatever's happening in that house has nothing to do with fences. He spends the rest of the day rebuilding what he can. Post by post, board by board. The sun climbs, then falls, and by 6, he's replaced nearly 40 feet of fence line. Each post set deep, each bracket tightened twice. That night, driving home, he almost mentions the cut marks to Harper again. He decides against it. She's got enough weighing on her, and a man in dusty jeans telling a woman like her that someone's sabotaging her property probably sounds like a stretch. Still, the thought sits heavy in his chest the whole drive home. The next morning, David returns before 7, coffee in one hand, tools in the other, expecting to pick up where he left off. Instead, he finds an entirely new stretch of fence torn apart. Fresh damage. Overnight damage. 20 feet of freshly rebuilt fencing, ripped down again, wood scattered across the grass like it was thrown, not blown. He stands there, coffee forgotten in his hand, staring at the wreckage of work he finished less than 12 hours ago. Somebody came back. David sets his coffee down without drinking it and walks the length of the damage, slow, careful, reading the ground the way another man might read a book. Boot prints. Deep ones, pressed into soft dirt near the tree line, leading away from the fence and toward an old service gate at the edge of the property. One so overgrown with vines that most people would forget it exists. He follows the prints until they vanish onto gravel. Whoever did this knew the property, knew where the cameras couldn't reach, knew exactly which section to hit twice. Harper meets him near the main house an hour later, and this time she doesn't rush past him. 2 black SUVs are parked in her driveway, doors marked with a state seal David doesn't recognize at first. "Inspectors," she says before he can ask. "Someone filed anonymous complaints against my company. Safety violations, code failures. None of it's true." "When did the complaints come in?" "Yesterday afternoon." Her voice is tight, controlled, the voice of someone holding a wall up with both hands. "The same day my fence got torn apart for the second time." David doesn't say what he's thinking. He doesn't have to. Harper's already thinking it too. The inspectors move through the property with clipboards and flashlights, checking wiring, checking structures, checking everything except the one thing sitting right in front of them. David watches one inspector walk past the sabotaged fence section twice, without so much as glancing at the blade marks cut into the wood. That's not an oversight. Men who inspect for a living don't miss straight lines. Later, alone near the tool shed, Harper finds him again. Her arms are crossed, her eyes rimmed with the kind of tired that makeup can't fully hide. "Someone inside my company did this," she says quietly, almost to herself. "Nobody outside knows this property well enough. Not the cameras, not the gate code, not which section to hit twice. Who has access? Too many people. She lets out a breath that shakes on the way out. My operations director, my head of security, 3 board members, my own assistant. Then it's someone you trust. Harper doesn't answer that. She doesn't have to. The silence between them says enough. David goes back to work, laying new boards where old ones failed, and for the first time since he arrived, Harper doesn't walk away to take a call. She stands there instead, watching him drive nails with a kind of focus most people in her world have forgotten how to hold on to. "How do you concentrate?" she finally asks, "with everything falling apart around you?" David doesn't look up from the board in front of him. "I fix the thing in front of me. Rest sorts itself out, eventually." She doesn't respond right away. When she does, her voice sounds different, smaller. "I don't know who to trust anymore." David sets the hammer down and looks at her directly for the first time since he arrived. "Then trust what you can see with your own eyes. Everything else, question it." Harper holds his gaze a moment longer than she means to. Then her phone buzzes, and the wall goes back up, and she walks away without another word. That evening, driving home, David can't shake the boot prints leading toward the service gate. Somebody close to Harper wants her to fail. And whoever it is, isn't finished yet. 3 days pass, and the fence holds. David arrives each morning before the sun clears the tree line, and each evening he leaves after it's long gone, the new sections standing straighter and stronger than anything that came before them. No new damage, no fresh boot prints, just steady, careful work, one post at a time. Harper starts appearing outside more often, not to check his progress. She stopped doing that after the 2nd day, but to talk. Small conversations at first. Coffee left on the porch rail without a word. Questions about the weather, the wood, the weight a good post needs to hold against wind. Then the questions get bigger. "You lost your wife," she says one afternoon. Not quite a question. David keeps working, hands steady on the board in front of him. 5 years ago, car accident. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He sets the nail, drives it home in 2 clean strikes. "Took me a long time to understand that grief doesn't leave. You just learn to carry it different." Harper is quiet for a moment, watching him work. "How do you raise a daughter alone and still show up here every morning like the world hasn't asked too much of you already?" "Some mornings it has asked too much." David finally looks at her. "I show up anyway. That's the only difference between people who make it and people who don't. Not talent. Just showing up on the days it would be easier not to." Something shifts in Harper's face, small and quiet, like a door opening a crack it hasn't opened in years. That afternoon, Nia's school lets out early for a teacher conference day, and David brings her along rather than leave her home alone. She wanders the edge of the property while he works, careful to stay where he can see her, and stops near Harper's garden, eyes wide at the rows of blooming color. "Your flowers are really pretty," Nia says. "Matter of fact, the way only a 10-year-old can be. My mom used to grow flowers like that." Harper crouches down to her eye level. "Yeah? What kind?" "Sunflowers. Big ones. Daddy still keeps her seeds in a jar in the kitchen." Harper glances toward David, and for the first time since he arrived at Ashwood Estate, she laughs. A real one, short and surprised, like it caught her off guard as much as anyone else. David watches from a distance, hammer paused mid-air, something loosening in his chest at the sound. But peace doesn't last long around this property. That evening, while replacing a bracket on the last damaged section, David's fingers brush against something buried inside the hollow post. A thin cable, black, threaded carefully through the wood like it was placed there on purpose, not left by accident. He pulls it free slowly. Not electrical wire. Something thinner. Something with a small metal casing at the end, no bigger than a fingertip, fitted with a tiny lens. David turns it over in his palm, chest tightening as the pieces click into place. Somebody didn't just sabotage this fence. Somebody's been listening. David doesn't move for a long moment, the small device sitting cold in his palm like it's still recording. He wraps it carefully in a cloth from his tool bag and carries it to the house. Footsteps quicker than usual, jaw set tight. Harper meets him on the porch, phone already halfway to her ear for another call she hasn't made yet. She stops when she sees his face. What is it? David holds out the cloth, unfolding it slow. Found this hidden inside one of the damaged posts. It's not wiring for anything electrical. Harper takes it, turns it over, and her breath catches audibly. That's a camera. Or a microphone. Maybe both. Her hand trembles slightly as she holds it up to the porch light, studying the tiny lens like it might explain itself. How long has this been here? No way to know for certain, but it was placed with care. Somebody wanted it hidden well. Harper sits down slowly on the porch step, the device still in her palm, staring past it at nothing. Every conversation I've had out here, every call about the board, the investors, the lawyers. Her voice drops lower. Someone's been listening to all of it. Who besides the people already on your list would have reason to plant something like this? Harper doesn't answer right away. When she finally speaks, her voice carries something new underneath it. Not just fear, but a cold, quiet anger settling in beneath the surface. I don't know yet, but whoever it is knows this property, knows my schedule, knows exactly where I stand outside to take calls I don't want overheard inside. David studies the tree line beyond the fence, the shadows stretching longer now that evening's settling in. You need to get this to someone who can trace it. Today, if possible. I know people, Harper says, corporate security, but if I bring this to them, and one of them planted it, then you'll know who not to trust by how they react. Harper looks up at him, something steadying behind her eyes despite everything unraveling around her. You think like someone who's used to figuring things out with very little information. I fix things for a living, David says. Most of the time, the problem isn't what people tell you it is. It's what they don't. She almost smiles at that. Tired but real. Then her phone rings again, and this time she doesn't rush to answer it. She stares at the screen a moment first, watching the name flash across it, before finally lifting it to her ear. Yes? David watches her face change as she listens. Whatever's being said on the other end drains the small warmth that had crept into her expression only moments earlier. Her knuckles whiten around the phone. When? She asks. A pause. Say that again? David steps closer without meaning to. Some instinct pulling him forward the way it did back at the fence line the very first morning. Harper lowers the phone slowly, her eyes finding his across the porch. That was security, she says, voice barely above a whisper. Someone accessed the estate's private server 2 hours ago, from inside the building. She swallows hard. They downloaded everything, every file, every recording, every private conversation held on this property for the last 6 months. The porch light flickers once behind her, and somewhere past the tree line, an engine turns over and pulls away into the dark. David's phone buzzes at 11 that night, an unknown number lighting up the screen the same way Harper's call once had. He answers, expecting her voice. Instead, a stranger speaks, calm and rehearsed, like the words were practiced in front of a mirror. Mr. Harrison, you don't know me, but I know you've been asking questions you shouldn't be asking. David sits up straight in the dark of his living room, Nia's door closed down the hallway, her nightlight glowing faint under the crack. Who is this? Someone who wants to make this easy for you. $75,000. Cash. All you have to do is forget what you found in that fence post and finish the job like none of it ever happened. David's grip tightens on the phone. $75,000 is more than he's made in the last 3 years combined. It's a new truck. It's Nia's braces. It's the mortgage paid off early and a mattress that isn't held together with duct tape. He thinks about all of it for exactly 1 second. No, David says. A pause on the other end, longer than expected. You should think harder about that answer. I already did. The line goes dead. David sits in the dark a long while after, phone still in his hand, heart hammering harder than it has in years. He doesn't call the police. Not yet. He doesn't know who's listening, who's watching, who's already decided he's a problem that needs solving. The next morning, he shows up at Ashwood Estate like nothing happened, and tells Harper everything. Her face goes pale under the porch light. Someone tried to buy your silence. Someone tried, David says. It didn't work. Harper sits down heavily on the porch step, elbows on her knees, staring at the fence line like it holds the answer to a question she's too afraid to ask out loud. Whoever's behind this has real money, real resources. This isn't some jealous employee anymore. No, David agrees. It's bigger than one person. Harper looks up at him. Something new in her expression now. Something closer to fear than frustration. If they tried to buy you off, and it didn't work. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. David already knows what comes next when bribery fails, and the stakes are this high. That evening, driving home, David checks his rearview mirror more than usual, the streetlights throwing long shadows across the road behind him. Nothing follows. Nothing feels wrong. But 2 mornings later, backing out of his driveway, the brake pedal sinks straight to the floor, with no resistance at all. His truck rolls backward, gaining speed down the slope of his own street, and David yanks the wheel hard, tires screaming against asphalt, missing a parked car by inches, before finally grinding to a stop against the curb. He sits there, hands shaking on the wheel, heart slamming against his ribs. Someone cut his brake line. This isn't about silence anymore. This is about making him disappear. David's mechanic holds up the severed brake line the next morning, turning it slow under the shop light, so David can see exactly what he's looking at. This wasn't wear and tear, the mechanic says. Somebody cut this clean, with a tool made for the job. You're lucky you're standing here telling me about it. David doesn't answer right away. He's thinking about Nia in the passenger seat. That same truck carries every single school morning. Thinking about how close 2 inches came to changing everything. He calls Harper from the shop parking lot, voice tighter than he means it to sound. They cut my brakes. Silence stretches on her end of the line before she finally speaks. David, I need you to stop coming to the estate. It isn't safe anymore. I'm not walking away from this. You have a daughter. That's exactly why I'm not walking away, David says. If I let fear decide what's right, what kind of example does that leave her? Harper doesn't argue further. Instead, she tells him what she's uncovered since their last conversation, voice lowering like even her own house might be listening. A consulting firm, hired months ago to review safety compliance across her company's properties, has been quietly altering inspection reports before they ever reached the board. Numbers changed, photos swapped, entire sections of paperwork rewritten to suggest violations that never existed. They needed a reason for the board to remove me, Harper says. Bad inspections, public embarrassment, enough noise to make investors nervous and directors desperate for a change in leadership. And the fence? A distraction. Something visible enough to keep everyone's attention on damage instead of paperwork. Her voice catches slightly. Except you noticed the wrong details for their plan to work. You saw a story before I even understood it was being written. David closes his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Then I need to tell someone official. Everything. The bribe, the brakes, the surveillance device. If you testify, Harper says quietly, they'll come after you harder than they already have. They already tried to kill me once by accident, David says. I'd rather stand in front of this than keep looking over my shoulder, waiting for round 2. Harper is quiet for a long moment. There's a federal hearing in 4 days. If you're willing to speak, it could change everything. But once you're on record, there's no walking it back. David thinks of his daughter asleep down the hallway of a house he's fought years to keep. Thinks of every fence he's ever repaired, every board he's ever set straight, simply because it was the right thing to do, whether anyone noticed or not. I'll testify, he says. The words settle heavy in the air, final and unshakable. 2 days later, David receives an envelope with no return address, slid halfway under his front door sometime in the night. Inside is a single photograph. Nia, walking into school that morning, captured from across the street. David's hands go cold around the paper. Someone wants him to know exactly how close they can get. David storms into Harper's office holding the photograph, hand shaking harder than he's willing to admit out loud. They know where my daughter goes to school, he says, voice low and controlled in the way that scares people more than shouting ever could. Harper takes the photograph, jaw tightening as she studies it. This ends now. I'm calling federal investigators today, not in 4 days. Within hours, agents arrive at Ashwood Estate, and everything moves faster than David expected. Statements taken, evidence collected. The surveillance device, the bribery call recorded on David's phone, the brake line preserved by his mechanic. Each piece slides into place, like boards fitting a frame built to hold weight. But at the emergency board meeting that afternoon, 3 directors stand ready to remove Harper from her own company, waving falsified inspection reports like they're already fact, not fiction. The evidence against Ashwood Construction is substantial, one director says, sliding papers across the table. Multiple safety violations across 4 properties. The board has no choice but to consider new leadership immediately. Harper stands to speak, but before she can, David steps forward from the back of the room, a worn leather notebook in his hand. I kept a maintenance log, he says. Every repair, every date, every hour spent on this property since the day I started. He opens it, pages filled with careful handwriting, dates lined up beside measurements, and material costs. Your inspection reports claim violations dated 2 weeks before the storm damage even occurred. But my log shows this fence was fully repaired and inspected by me, personally, the week before those reports were filed. He sets the notebook on the table. Someone backdated evidence that couldn't have existed yet. A stunned silence settles over the room. One director reaches for the notebook, flipping through pages with growing unease, as the timestamps refuse to match the story they were told to believe. Harper's security chief steps forward next, laptop open. Server logs confirm it. The falsified reports were uploaded 4 days after their supposed inspection date. Someone altered the system's internal clock to disguise it. The room shifts, quiet turning into murmurs, murmurs turning into open doubt, aimed squarely at the 3 directors who moments earlier looked so certain of victory. But just as the tide begins turning, one director slams a folder onto the table. Even if the fence timeline is wrong, the outside contractor's insurance claims still show verified property damage exceeding $200,000. That claim alone justifies board intervention. Harper's face tightens. This is the piece she hasn't cracked yet. David studies the folder a long moment, something familiar prickling at the back of his mind. Who filed that insurance claim? He asks quietly. The director hesitates. An independent adjuster, contracted through a third-party firm. David's stomach drops. That's the same firm, he says slowly, that offered me $75,000 to stay quiet. The room falls completely silent. Whatever conspiracy this started as, it just widened into something far larger than one company, one board, or one falsified report. Federal agents move through Ashwood Estate within the hour, warrants in hand, seizing files from the very firm David just named, in front of the entire board. By evening, everything collapses fast. The consulting firm's owner is taken into custody at his downtown office, insurance records showing years of manufactured claims used to manipulate corporate boards across 3 states. Harper's operations director, the one benefiting most from her removal, is caught on recovered server data coordinating with the firm from the very beginning. The board reverses its decision within 24 hours. Harper retains full control of the company she built from nothing. Word spreads fast through Clover Falls. Local news picks up the story. A quiet contractor's careful notebook cracking open a conspiracy that reached farther than anyone imagined. Old clients who once haggled David down on price or refused to pay him fairly start calling, apologizing, some publicly admitting on camera that they misjudged him simply because of what his truck looked like parked in their driveway. But David doesn't chase the attention. He goes home each evening the same way he always has, checking homework, packing lunches, tucking his daughter in before another early morning. 3 days after the hearing, Harper shows up at his front door unannounced. No security, no assistant trailing behind her, just her, standing quiet on his porch step. Inside, she notices things most visitors never would. A chair repaired so carefully the crack barely shows. Family photographs lining a hallway wall. Corners worn soft from years of being touched. A handwritten note taped to the refrigerator in a child's handwriting. "Don't forget my field trip money, Daddy." "You've built something here," Harper says quietly, "even with everything working against you." "It's not much," David says. "It's everything that matters." Harper takes a slow breath. "I didn't come here to thank you, David. I came here to offer you something." She explains it plainly. A new position within her company, one that didn't exist until 3 days ago because she created it herself. Director of Property Integrity and Facilities, overseeing maintenance standards across every location the company owns nationwide. Full benefits, retirement matching, education assistance for Naya, all the way through college if she wants it. A salary David has never once let himself imagine. "I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you," Harper says, steady and certain. "I'm offering it because you're the only person in this entire mess who never once lied to me, bent the truth, or asked what was in it for you." David sits with the weight of it a long moment, looking around his small kitchen, the life he's built board by board, decision by decision. "I've always worked for myself," he finally says, "never had to answer to anybody." "I'm not asking you to answer to me," Harper says. "I'm asking you to help me build something that can't be corrupted the way mine almost was." David looks toward the hallway, toward his daughter's closed door, toward every hard year that led him exactly here. "Give me until tomorrow," he says. Harper nods, stands, and leaves as quietly as she arrived. That night, David sits at his kitchen table long after Nia falls asleep, staring at nothing, weighing independence against the kind of stability he stopped believing was possible for someone like him. David calls Harper before sunrise the next morning, before Naya's even awake, before the coffee finishes brewing. "I'll take it," he says. 6 months later, Ashwood Construction looks different from the inside. Maintenance requests move through a transparent system now, one where no manager can quietly bury a complaint or manipulate a report without 3 separate people signing off first. David built it himself, based on nothing more complicated than the maintenance log he carried in his own truck for years. New hires go through ethics training modeled directly after conversations David once had standing beside a broken fence, teaching young tradespeople that reputation isn't built through talent alone, but through the small, unglamorous choices nobody's watching you make. Harper still calls him some evenings, not about business, just to talk, the way 2 people do once they've survived something together that neither fully expected. Nia stands taller now too, telling her classmates without any hesitation, "My dad doesn't just fix fences. He helps people rebuild trust." David still wakes before sunrise most mornings, some habits too deep to break. But now, when he checks the mailbox, there's no overdue notice waiting inside. When Nia asks about braces or field trips, he no longer has to calculate what he'll have to sacrifice to say yes. Storms don't reveal how strong a fence really is. They reveal how well it was built in the first place. The same is true of people. Character isn't proven when life makes things easy. It's revealed the moment doing the right thing costs you everything you have left to lose. If this story moved you even a little, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this one are coming. Stories about quiet people doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Drop a comment below and tell somebody who needs to hear it today that integrity still matters, because somewhere out there, somebody's having the exact kind of day David had when this story started, and your words might be exactly what they need to keep going.